Yeah. You still jumped a little bit, didn't you? Just a little bit. Clerk will call the roll. Here. Present.
Here.
Gary Pickens, Commissioner Precinct 30.
Here.
Randy Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
They'll be here in a minute.
Constitutes a quorum.
Our invocation today will be delivered by Terry Kaiser, Pastor Terry Kaiser from Alliance Life Church. We sure appreciate you coming down today. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges.
Lord, we love you. We thank you for the day. We thank you for our communities, our city, and I pray, God, that you will bless everything that goes on here today, that you'd give wisdom and guidance, and any tensions would be managed, and there would be unity and good solutions for our place where we live, our communities. We thank you for this day, and we ask your blessings on it in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Mr. Manius, agenda announcements.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, we have several announcements related to the agenda this morning. The first, we want to take one item off of consent. This would be under the Budget and Risk Management Department. So when we get to that particular section, if we could remove item 8B2 from the consent agenda. We do have an audience participation form on that particular agenda item. Also, members of the court, as we have done in the past, we're going to go ahead and move things around on our agenda. Once we get to the administrator section, we're going to move to the briefing items, and we're going to, first of all, take the Keller-TIF discussion. And after that, we're going to have the bond package discussion, and then we'll move back into our agenda items. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of July the 20th. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Fickens. Commissioner Johnson.
He's here.
I heard something. Commissioner Johnson. Was that a yes? Almost a yes.
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes unanimously. Proclamations. We got a couple of things today. We have employee recognition, but we also need to remember that this week is our brown bag week. So get your brown bags out and put your money in it.
In. Done.
Done?
Done.
Well, okay. You embarrassed me. I got to put money in.
Oh.
So if everybody, again, the food bank, we do a lot of work with the food bank. It is a tremendous organization. Commissioner Johnson, we're all putting in $100 bills, so I know you got many of those. No, don't be laughing.
I'll get you when I can.
So please, everybody, think about that. And $10 will give 50 meals, which is, I think, an even better deal than our jail meals cost. God, I hope so. So everybody do that. Everybody give, if you can, give $10. And where's Susan? Oh, there you are. So I'll give you this before we end up spending it on lunch.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Again, I want to thank our employees. We have food drives. We do a lot of stuff for them. Are we having an auction?
Yes, sir. We are. It closes at noon on Friday.
Closes at noon on Friday. So if you haven't gone to the auction, do that, please. We also we continue to have the books for sale. If people want the COVID books, you can go and also, I think, get those online on that same auction at the end of the list or at the top of the, it's at the end of the list, isn't it? Where'd she go? I can't see you over there. The COVID books, if they wish to purchase the COVID books, they can do that at the bottom of the auction list, even though that's, everything else is on the food bank. That's at the bottom, and that if we have extra proceeds over the cost on that, we're going to send that to the United Way as a part of that deal. Other announcements?
Just one announcement for the Congressional District 6 special election, that today is election day. So polls are open until 7 p.m. So if you reside in Congressional District 6 in Tarrant County, please make sure you make your voice heard in that election. Thank you.
And Your Honor, I ask that we adjourn today's meeting in memory of Mr. Devoid D. Jennings, an outstanding citizen and servant of Tarrant County, a proponent of opening our economy in ways where all people can participate, that the benefits of living in America should flow to everyone, not just a few. Dee was a leader, and he shall be missed in this community. So I ask that we close in his memory today.
Certainly. I think that's great. He's going to be very missed, and it's going to be very difficult to even attempt to try to fill his shoes, certainly.
He was president and CEO of the Fort Worth Tarrant County Metropolitan Black Chamber of Commerce.
Yes. I would ask that we also just keep his family, including his wife, Ms. Gwen Barbie, in our prayers.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Fickus, Commissioner Johnson, either of y'all have any?
I tell you what, I worked with Dee on a number of different things, mainly transportation related, and that he would bring the chamber in and bring their involvement in. And he was a prince of a guy. I tell you what, he never, everybody was a friend to Dee. He was an amazing man.
A 1965 graduate of historic I.M. Terrell.
Yes,
High
I
School.
saw that. Now he was a little older than you, Commissioner.
He was a class or two ahead of me, but we were there. We were there at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, he was a great guy. We're going to miss Dee.
We sure
Super
are.
friend.
Okay, employee recognition. This month, or today, we're actually going to be looking at 25 plus year employees from June, July, and August of 2020 in our effort to catch up, and again to not fail to recognize our greatest assets within Tarrant County. First, we have Cedric Dickens, who is with Juvenile Services. There he is. Started out as a detention officer, then moved to community service restitution, and then went back to direct the post adjudication program, and now is in the alternative education program area. I asked him about memorable moments, and he said there were times when the kids would come back and thank the folks that had worked with them, and then parents would also come with them. He remembered one child that he had worked with, one kid that he had worked with that had come here really from out of country, had gotten in trouble. They had worked through the process and worked through with him. He's come back and thanked them. He is now actually a teacher in the school where he got in trouble.
Oh my.
So it's one of those great stories of working with the kids and really, and I think we see this, I hear this many times mentioned, not only hearing this, but also as I talk with people from CSCD, it's, we treat folks as individuals, as someone to be respected, and we try to get them on the right track, and I think it made the world of difference in this particular now adult's life. What he liked most was the camaraderie, the stability and the benefits. He actually, it says 25. We know it would be 26 because we're a year late. But in this case, it's 27. And I said, okay, wait a minute. Where did the 27 come from? Well, he was misguided in the beginning and finally realized that heaven was next door. And so he started in Dallas and actually spent a year there. And then he saw the light and moved west and has been with us now for 26 years. And, he said, they've got a little running joke. I think he may have started. He says, he said, I just feel like I'm the best employee Tarrant County has. And I told him there might be a few people that would argue with him about that, but I wasn't going to get in the middle of that at this point in time. Cedric, thank you very much for the 27 years you've given to the kids in the North Texas area.
Judge, would you ask Cedric who he brought with him this morning?
Please, yes. Stand up and introduce your folks.
Yeah, definitely. I got my co-worker, Mrs. Guillermo Montoya, my supervisor, Mr. Jesus Reyes, my son, and my little grandbaby, Shirley and Bronx.
Next is Randy Walker, Constable 4's office, 26 years. Started out in the sheriff's office working in the jail and then went to court securities. Was a coordinator for Judge Coffey for a while. He actually retired in 2011 and then came back in 2013 and went full-time in 2016 for the constable. I asked him about memorable moments, and I thought it was very appropriate. He said, in law enforcement, we try to avoid memorable moments because it usually means a whole lot of paperwork. I asked him what he liked most, and he said, without question, without hesitation, it was the people. Randy, thank you very much for your years of service with Tarrant County.
And Randy brought some people with him this morning.
Well, I don't know about that first character.
My Constable, Jody Johnson, and Chief Deputy Fred Rogers.
Thank y'all for being here. Okay, we're going to have to go back. It looks like Cedric brought another couple of fans that just got here. Go ahead, Cedric, get up and introduce them too. I think I know who they are, but you might.
My wife plays with my other grandson. Yeah.
Thank y'all for being here. Well, at least you got a cheering club to also advocate that you're best employee for Tarrant County.
Yeah, they would agree.
Cedric, I think you're on the hook for brunch.
Yeah, there's going to be a meal in here someplace. Next is Mary Butler with the Criminal District Attorney's Office, 26 years. There's Mary. Started out as an intern and didn't plan on being here very long. Well, so much for that. Then she got hired in the misdemeanor area, and normally I track it. Well, I figured that if I was going to track this one, I was going to need a couple of pages just to track where all she's been. She said, I have been all over this department. And she's now the chief of technology. And, that kind of had given me hope that she wasn't an attorney. But I asked her, and she said, no, I'm an attorney. I know how I know what your thoughts are. But she has done an absolutely fantastic job in the office. Memorable moments. What she said was, She laughs, and I always say when they laugh, well, okay, I know you just thought of something that you're not going to tell me. And she says, you're right. She said, most of this stuff I cannot discuss. And she said, quite honestly, most of it isn't fit for polite company. What she said I like most is over the years, she's come to, again, appreciate the stability and the benefits that we've offered. I asked her if there was anything else. And she said, first off, she said she's a Ranger fan, and anybody who admits that in today's environment has really got to be a Ranger fan. She said her husband also works for the county. He is in the tax office and has been in the tax office for 23 years. Stand up. There you go. There's her husband. So we thank you both very much for working for the county. I asked her, I said, so let me get this straight. You've been here 26, so obviously you convinced him that the county was the place to be. And she says, that's right. And, they're still here. They hope to be, let me get back to my reading here. Occasionally, over the years, their schedules will match, and when they do, they're able to commute to and from work together. She's glad to still be here and hopes to be here for a few more years. So again, we want to thank both of you, but Mary, we want to thank you especially for your 26 years of service to Tarrant County.
And looks like she may have a couple of others with her.
I do. I brought Andrea Jenkins from our post-conviction. He was kind enough to give me a ride, so I didn't. I'm down here in the heat.
Thank you. Next is Stan. Okay, Stan, is it Geisler or Giesler? Geisler. Is in the public health area as a customer health supervisor. That's where he started and he's still doing it. Memorable moments. Well, it's the crazy ones. The West Nile, anthrax, Ebola, and now COVID. And each one of those, I'm sure, carries their own set of special memories. Nothing quite like COVID. When I asked him what he liked most, again, it was the people. And he said it was doing something every day that he loves. He said, it's almost like I don't have a job. I just get to come and enjoy what I'm doing in life. I asked him if there was anything else, and he said, no. He said, to be quite honest with you, I'm not really a big fan of attention, and so just coming is not something that I was looking forward to. Stan, thank you very much for your 26 years of service. Next is Paul Rojas. Is Paul here? There he is. Sheriff Confinement. Now, it looks to me like you have some folks with you, and so before Commissioner Brooks reminds me continuously again, why don't you introduce who you have with you today?
My wife Cindy and my daughter Ariana.
Welcome. Now, as I understand, y'all have been married 31 years in October. Cindy, let's see, you're. This may not be the. Let me go back and look at my. So you're the daughter that graduated from Cornell and is going into the master's program in South Florida sometime this fall, maybe, working in that. I got this right. I can tell by the wrong because I got this. I can tell by the expression on her face.
I work at the University of South Florida.
Okay. So now let me start back off where I started. Started out in Cold Springs. Went to the FBI fingerprinting school. Worked in ID in the jail, then to warrants. He now does ID error resolution verification of the fingerprints. So I think that means when something don't look right, you got to fix it.
Yes, sir.
That's what I thought. Memorable moments is some of the inmates he's dealt with while he was in the housing area. He said it's a great place to work. Everybody's always been fair. There's always work, no layoffs. Now, I hope you've heard a string of folks, as we've said, it's the stability, It's the way we treat folks. The benefits aren't bad either. Sometimes the pay is not as good as we might like it to be, but the benefits are always great. And we're going to make the pay a little bit better, hopefully later on today. When I talked with him 6 years ago, his son was in the Navy and was deployed in the Middle East, and his daughter was at TCC. So fast forward 6 years. His son is now out of the military, out of the Navy, and is married and has a son of his own. We talked a little bit about his daughter. His grandson is 5 minutes away. So, I'll tell you as a grandparent how blessed we are to have our grandchildren that close. Now, sometimes having the children that close is not as good of a deal, but the grandchildren, it's okay. You can always feed them a lot of sugar right before they go home. We appreciate y'all coming down today, and Paul, we very much appreciate your 31 years of service to Tarrant County. Thank you very much. Next is Abdul Salah. Information technology is now in public health as a technical support area. He said, I want to come down and talk with you. I don't want to do this over the phone. And I thought, okay. I think we did this at 25 years too. But let me kind of go through everything and I'll get to that. Started in the district clerk's office, moved to the tax office. As I said, he's now in public health technical support. Memorable moments. My memory doesn't follow back that far, but he says when he applied for a new position, it asked him to answer yes or no, and unfortunately, I don't remember exactly what the question was that you were supposed to answer yes or no to. Taking boxes had filed at the top. Oh, one of the memorable moments was, I guess you were taking some boxes and the top flew off and papers blew all over the place. What does he like most? It's the group that he gets to work with. He really feels like it's one big family. When I talked to him 6 years ago and asked him what had been going on, he was mentioning that he was a ham operator, had worked in Arlington parades. He was a member of the medical corps. This guy likes to do a lot of things outside of work. He speaks, by the way, he speaks 6 or 7 different languages. At that time, he had 2 daughters. One was a teacher, and one was in 11th grade. Fast forward 6 years. He's now joined the Civil Air Patrol, still working toward getting his license. COVID kind of slowed that down for a lot of things. His wife, I guess she went to England. And he decided, okay, she's out of the country. So he decided to skydive for the first time. And they had he had a little video and he posted it. And so some of his wife's friends were looking at this and they said, oh, look what Abdul's doing. And she says, no, that's not. That is him. So I think when she gets back, they're going to have some talking to do. And as Ricky used to say, he's going to have some splaining to do. 2 daughters. One's still the teacher. The other one is working toward being a registered nurse. She's at UTA right now. He also does many triathlons and he teaches part-time at TCC. So he's had a lot of stuff to do over the last 6 years. Abdul, we want to thank you so much for your 31 years of service to Tarrant County.
A real Renaissance man.
Now, I'm guessing, I think this is the right one. Paul Seitz with the sheriff's office is my next person. But he's not going to be here. If he stood up, we all need to get out. He works in the jail. He tested positive for COVID last week. Now, okay, that's HIPAA, you're not supposed to say. I asked him. The first question I asked him was, had you gotten vaccinated? And he said, yes. I was one of the first ones to get vaccinated. And he said, I hardly can tell that I have COVID. It's a very, very, very mild case. He's having absolutely no problems. I said, well, I understand that, but please stay at home. Please don't come up here. But he was one that was a big advocate for getting that vaccine because it has really made it a easy time this time for him. So Paul has been with the county for 31 years, and when he gets back, congratulate him. Next is Steve Condor, and I also don't believe he was able to make it. Something came up, and so he wasn't able to make it, but he's with the DA's office. So he's in the Conviction Integrity Unit, and we want to thank him for his 31 years of service. Next is Rick Johns with CSCD. Rick's here. There he is. Did you bring somebody along with you today?
I did. I brought back probation officer, my wife.
I've never heard it put quite that way, but it's very appropriate. I can just tell you. Rick started off, he retired from the Air Force and then came to the county, started off at Miller Street, moved to downtown, was a field officer, and now is an assessment officer. Memorable moments, again, getting phone calls from folks that he had worked with through the probation area. And again, I think that's just, it just goes to show how I think involved and how much our folks are trying to do everything they can to help people along. He said, I love the opportunity to work with a lot of different people. And he says, I really enjoy the way the county takes care of its folks. He said, I've really appreciated working for the county and hope to be here for more years, a few more years. We want to again thank you, Rick, for your time and your 31 years with Tarrant County. Thank you for coming down today. Now, 41 years with the county, Mike Lemur, but Mike's not here. He's in Transportation Services, and about 2 weeks ago, he had a heart attack. Now he's feeling great. He's ready to come back. He was going to be here today, and what was the first question I asked him? Have you had your vaccines? And he said no. And I said, well, I think it might be a good idea if you stay home. And he said, well, my wife kind of agrees with you. And I said, well, that's the second reason why you need to be staying home. He's going to get the vaccine just as soon as he can, as soon as the doctor will allow him to get that. But we talked, and he's had a great time with Tarrant County. He said, again, what I like most is the stability, the benefits. He said, I've just really, really enjoyed my time with the county. So when Mike gets back to work, let's thank him for his 41 years of service and for everything he's done to help the citizens and the people of Tarrant County. That's a whole bunch of years with folks with Tarrant County. We have cookies and 504C. So at this time, we'll go ahead and let y'all head that way. And again, thank you so much for your years of service. And thank those family members that came down because you supported these folks in their time with Tarrant County. move that we receive and file the personnel agenda. Y'all just sitting out there trying to catch me, aren't you? I can see you shaking your heads. We got a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Court members, you have before you the consent agenda with the notation to remove item 8B2.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the Court, we can now move to the briefing items, and we're going to take up item C, which is the City of Keller Tax Increment Financing Reinvestment Zone number 2. Ms. South is here to address the court at this time.
Good morning.
Hey, Megan.
How are y'all?
Good.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
All right, we'll get this started. So I'm gonna go back and let them do this. So the City of Keller has established a 795-acre tax increment financing reinvestment zone across the Highway 377 commercial corridor. The TERS was established to create a dedicated funding mechanism for the redevelopment and development along the Highway 377 corridor, to renovate public infrastructure throughout the TERS and create a catalyst for economic development potential throughout Old Town Keller. So the TERS is expected to raise the taxable value within the zone from its current value of $176 million to over $839 million over the 30-year life of the zone. And today we have Clerk McDaniel from Petty & Associates, and then also Mayor Mazzani, Mark Hafner, the city manager, and Mary Culver, the director of economic development from Keller, who are here to give you all an overview of their plans for the Keller TERS. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Kirk or whomever would like to come up.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for your time today.
You bet.
Let me adjust this real quick. Tall people. Like Megan said, my name is Clerk McDaniel with Petty & Associates, and we are the economic development consultant for the city. And so we have the full city team here today, so lots of reinforcements in case you guys have any questions. But with that, I'll just go into a brief overview of this TERS. So this specifically started as an economic development strategy for the city. They specifically wanted to target 377 corridor and most especially Old Town Keller. They already have lots of efforts underway for revitalization there, but they wanted a dedicated funding mechanism for it. And so a TERS was a clear solution for that. And so this was created, this has been discussed for over a year throughout 2020, but the timing was really perfect for 2021. And so it was created in March of this year. And then just recently, a couple weeks ago, we approved an amended and restated plan. And I will mention that again at the end of this, why it's amended and restated. The next slide here is the actual boundaries of the zone. Like Megan said, it's just under 800 acres. Primarily, we tried to capture a lot of the undeveloped areas alongside there because that's where we'll see a lot of the new value and growth within the TERS and within the city. But we also tried to match it up with the city's infrastructure needs that were going to be occurring throughout the long-term 30-year future, because that is the term of the zone. This next slide is the city's new 2021 future land use plan. This was being worked on concurrently with the TERS. And so as they were updating their future land use plan, we actually took those land uses that they were anticipating and used those whenever we were calculating the actual TERS revenue and the new value that we anticipated. So we took those anticipated land uses, meshed them with the vacant acreage or the undeveloped acreage in order to get to our incremental value that is shown on this next slide. Not this next slide, the one following it. Sorry. The actual TERS priorities, as Megan said, is to create a dedicated funding mechanism to help redevelop Old Town Keller and revitalize it there, and really to actualize that new future land use plan with multiple new diverse uses within that area. And then on the next slide, now you can see the incremental value of the zone, that's $663 million. That's the new value on the ground in addition to the base value. and that we use this based on that new 2021 future land use plan. And really, that is only going off of the vacant acreage, undeveloped potential within the area. With Old Town Keller, there's a lot of redevelopment potential for new values there. So this $663 million is actually a very conservative number. It could very well be greater than that as Old Town Keller is revitalized. But we were very comfortable with this number, and so we went with this as we were reviewing it. This next slide is for the actual assumptions that we had for the feasibility study that we completed within the TERS. The city is going to contribute at 50% of their tax rate, which is 39.5 cents, and the request of the county would be that they would participate at 50% as well. And if the county chooses to do that, then we would also pursue the college district and request that they participate at 50% as well. Again, the base taxable value of the zone is $176 million, and as far as the actual new development that would come online, we think that'll be about $385 million. This next slide is showing the distribution of the revenue that would come from this property. So at current, there's a little bit under $500,000, and I'm calling that the base revenue, and that's the green bar, and that goes to the county's general fund right now, and that would continue to go to the county's general fund. As you are all aware, TERSs only work off of the new value within the zone, and so it would be split 50%, and so the yellow bar is what would go to the TERS fund, and the blue bar is what would go to the county's general fund. And as you can see, as you get to the later years of the zone, the county's net of that 50% is actually greater than the base revenue in the first place. So moving on to this next slide, this is the proposed public improvements. The city did a great job of looking at the long-term needs in the zone, really from a 30-year perspective. And so they have a very strong list of projects that we split into 2 tiers. And this really goes back to that amended and restated plan that I mentioned earlier. We had approved an original final plan in April of this year, and then we approached county staff, we approached Commissioner Fixis's office to discuss the TERS with them, and there were a few projects, not many, but there were a few where we received feedback that they didn't want to see the county's increment going toward those specific projects, and it's parks, art, and then the realization project. And so we went back and we amended our plan and split it into 2 different categories. So we have Tier 1 projects that the county's increment would go towards, and that is the vast majority of the projects. They're the highest priority projects, and it's the ones that the vast majority of the TERS revenue would go towards funding. But we wanted to leave in as this Tier 2 projects with the note that the county would not the county increment would not go towards those projects in case the TERS overperforms and there's more TERS revenue available than originally anticipated. That way the city has the flexibility to use its own increment to fund those projects. And so we brought up that concept with county staff, and they seemed to be receptive to it, but that's why we split it into the Tier 1 and the Tier 2. Any questions?
Historically, we have put ceilings on the amount of dollars that we commit. Are we doing that in this one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that would have prevented also us from putting any money toward other projects that would be determined in the future without the court's approval at that point in time.
Yes, sir.
That's correct. Okay.
The county increment would only go towards those projects specifically within the Tier 1 projects that are listed in the plan as it is today. If there is a future amendment to the plan to add more projects and the city wanted to request your increment, they would need to come back to the court and request that. So with that said, that's my last slide. So if there are any questions, I am happy to answer them.
I don't know that I've asked this before, but so the projects that we've said we're going to participate in are the Tier 1, shows a total of $121 million. Mm-hmm. What if there is a overrun in a particular project? Does that commit further dollars for the county, or does the ceiling prevent that from happening?
The ceiling would prevent that from happening. So you will have a specific cap of, I believe it's $14.9 million, and the county would not participate beyond that.
Now, they could if you came back and simply asked at that point. And part of the reason that we have historically done that was because once we approve this, and we usually have one representative on the board, and so in order to protect our interest and not a lot of other things being added down the line by us putting the ceiling in, that means that the board will have to come back anytime they feel like they wanted to add something that we had not previously approved.
Yes, sir.
They have to come back to the county.
Judge, we had, our office had met with the staff and with Petty Associates on a couple of occasions to go over most of the issues. And we had, there were a couple items that we suggested that we modify and change up on some of the costs that we would incur, and that went into that Tier 2 group and out of the Tier 1 group. So we were satisfied that they had met what we thought were the needs of Tarrant County, and that's a bustling area, and there's a lot happening in that area, and I see this as kind of in a way, I mean, it's a tip, but it's kind of it's a plan. Put it all together. There's infrastructure needs on up to the north, wastewater and things like that. So I think this accomplishes a lot of those items.
How is there's a TIF for the downtown where the town hall is. How's that TIF doing?
It completed all of its projects and is no longer active.
Okay.
And yes.
Correct.
Yeah, that's out east on Keller Parkway.
That was one of the first ones we did.
Right.
Is there any action anticipated on this today?
I would move approval if
We're not
ready to step forward.
Not yet.
One other note that
needs to.
One other note that we were going to that I meant to mention is Keller has submitted a couple of projects for the bond program. I believe there's one specifically for Elm Street that is also listed within the TERS plan. And so whenever we did the amended and restated, we added a footnote 2 just to be very clear. If that project is selected for the bond program, it will not receive TERS funding.
Good deal.
Okay.
Just to be very clear on that one.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Let's pull this back down. So just to recap, we're being asked to participate at 50% over the 30-year life of the zone. We're estimating that will be approximately $14.9 million. The hospital district will not be participating. They will be seeking college district approval. And if there aren't any objections to this, we will move forward and begin working with them to draft the participation agreement and bring it back hopefully in the next few weeks for your approval.
Keep moving.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Megan.
So members of court, we can now go to the general obligation bond program, and we're going to need to do something just slightly different. The speakers are going to be sitting in my chair. We have an issue with their camera, and they can pick up this spot, but they can't there. We're correcting that, so anyone that makes a presentation will be in this location.
I get to sit in your chair?
That's right.
Wow.
So anyway, let's talk a little bit about it, and then if you have questions, we do have a presentation itself. I think we're about ready to put that presentation up. I'm going to go ahead and start. And as you remember, we talked last week about various versions of the orders itself. And in the bond package, there are two different orders. There's one that deals with the transportation piece, that's the $400 million. And there's the second one deals with the criminal district attorney's office and the proposed building for that particular department. We had different conversations last week. I believe that Commissioner Fickus, you had asked that we discuss those issues with the district attorney's office and Ms. Wilson, and we have had those conversations. Bond counsel has had those conversations also. And there's two different proposals and proposed language dealing with that. But if we could just take this first and just note that Jonathan Krantz, our bond counsel, is in the audience, and if you have any direct questions for him, he'll be more than happy to come forward and answer those. So when you look at this, this is the language, proposed language for Prop A, which is transportation. I believe that we provided that information to the court, and we would seek any other input that you would like to have. Of course, Jonathan will be up here if you have additional questions for him. Once we move past this, we'll move to Proposition B.
The only thing that I'll mention, I mentioned it last week, but I just want to make sure that you agree, is that I had suggested that we might add the word federal in there, but I also wouldn't, be opposed to anybody if it was a private sector type folks. I believe that the way you've worded it, in that it says in the first part of that very long sentence, the issuance of $400 million for purchasing, constructing, reconstructing, renovating, rehabilitating, improving, and maintaining streets, roads, and highways and bridges within Tarrant County. If we were to stop right there, it says basically we can work with anybody we want to work with as long as it's on one of these, as long as it's on a street, a road, a highway, or a bridge. Now, it doesn't say anything about rail, so there goes mass transit, or transit on rail. But it takes care of everything else. And then you go on forward to say, including city, county, state. Should we say including but not limited to?
Well, as I mentioned before, we're mirroring our 2006 bond proposition language, which always gives us a little bit of cover when we're going down to the AG for bond approval. So my preference as bond counsel would be to leave it as it is. I think it's once these bonds are approved, you're going to be issuing them over a period of several years. And the language we've got it drafted in here, I believe, gives you the flexibility over those years, given changing circumstances and technology, to pivot a little bit if you need to. Obviously, you're limited to kind of the essence of this, which is transportation, it's roads and so forth, as listed on there. But you do have a degree of flexibility, and I think the language as drafted would allow us to address the concern that you specifically mentioned, should we need to.
We can't use it on rail, we can't use it on bike paths.
You could use it on a bike path that was directly related to a road. So a sidewalk next to a road or a bike path built into a road. But it would need to be part of the road. What you couldn't do is finance.
Somebody else will have to determine whether they're going to paint it to have a bike in there. Okay.
And that's important, given that not everyone in our county has a car. So we do have to figure out ways for people to get around, less a car.
Does the language that the judge suggested, including but not limited to, do violence to your proposition?
No, I don't think it does. And we can certainly
then
make
if
that.
it makes him comfortable, I don't have a problem with adding it.
And I'm comfortable, as long as what you've said, I'm comfortable with this as it is, but that was just a suggestion. I just want to make it very clear that we can deal with anybody that's got a road.
Understood.
Or we can deal with anybody to build a road. Okay, I'm okay with Proposition A as it is.
I am as well.
All right.
Good.
So we would ask, just to make sure we have it on the record, that we receive a vote on this. We're requesting that you approve Proposition A to be included in the bond package.
Move approval of the language for Proposition A.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
So now we could go to Proposition B, alternate 1. And what this is, it's very similar to what you saw last week from the administrator's office, where the language is $116 million for the purchase, construction, improvements, and equipment of a county office building for the primary purpose of providing office space for the office of the criminal district attorney and for other criminal justice activities and facilities to support thereof. Before we have conversation with that, there is a alternate B that the district attorney's office has submitted. They have dropped the dollar amount to $101 million versus $116 million. And I believe that the only other change is, rather than Proposition A basically states that for other criminal justice activities, this one says for other law enforcement activities. So those are the two changes on Prop B, alternate alternate 1 and alternate 2. And so both of these are up for discussion. I will tell you that we are concerned about the $101 million number that we've talked with our facilities director. With the things that are going on in Tarrant County and what will be going on in the next several years, you might recall the hospital district is going to be engaged in a major building program, that the federal government is negotiating a major infrastructure building program. And we believe that it would be safer and give the Commissioners Court more flexibility if that number went from 101 to 116. Obviously, if you don't need the money, you don't need to borrow the money.
And the 116 is what bond counsel has told, our bond advisors have told us, is the amount that would require us not to have to raise the tax rate.
That's correct. It fits within our tax rate.
I'm fine with the 116. I think that all of this activity is going to drive up the costs of concrete and other essential components of construction, steel. I'm fine with the 116 because, as you said, if we don't need it, we don't have to borrow it.
That's correct.
I would prefer the language in alternate 2, other law enforcement activities. I think it's more specific.
So I'd like for someone to walk me through those two alternatives, why the choice in language. Obviously, it's not just semantics, so.
Well, and I want to be sure we're reading the right one, or the one I'm looking at is the right one. I have for alternate 2, the language as follows, and I've had several copies, so I may have picked up the wrong one and brought it in here this morning. Mine says the issuance of $116 million of Tarrant County, Texas general obligation bonds for purchasing, constructing, improving, and equipping of a criminal district attorney office building and facilities in support thereof, and the purchase or improvement of sites therefore, and the levying of a tax in payment thereof. Is that the wording that I'm?
No.
Okay, well then that's. Well, I don't want to read. I want to read what I'm actually going to be, the way it's going to be on the ballot. Okay, so let me try this again. So it's the issuance of $101 million of Tarrant County, Texas general obligation bonds for purchasing, constructing, improving, or equipping criminal district attorney, a criminal district attorney office building to provide space for prosecutorial efforts and for other law enforcement activities and facilities in support thereof, and the purchase and improvements of site thereof, and the levying of tax payments.
So I still have my question out there.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to be sure I was looking at that I was looking at the same thing you were looking at.
Gotcha, okay. So why the alternative to specifically stating law
changing it.
enforcement activities, yeah, and prosecutorial efforts and law enforcement activities. So I can't remember who you said has suggested that verbiage, but I'd just like to understand why we're suggesting this verbiage versus what we had before.
The verbiage that you see as it relates to and for other law enforcement activities is verbiage that the district attorney's office has provided. That's alternate 2 to Proposition B. Our the staff's recommendation, initial recommendation was 116 million, and the language that is embedded in alternate 1.
Okay.
So let me ask the bond counsel a question in regards to what you're saying.
Yeah.
As I read this, okay, first off, this is a county building that will be under the control of the Commissioner's Court.
Correct, sir.
Period. And by the way this is written, it says this, I think it's good because we're identifying it as a criminal district attorney's office building, which says that's the primary purpose of that. And for other law enforcement activities, which says that may appear to be somewhat limiting. But then it says, and facilities in support thereof, which in my mind says that, and facilities in support thereof.
That's the parking garage.
Well, I understand it can be the parking garage, it can be a tunnel, it can be a sky bridge.
Yeah,
It can be off-site HVAC, it can be any number of things, but it ensures that we're not limited to a single structure, that we can build support structures. The primary structure here is going to be the criminal district attorney building.
And how broad, I mean, we can't with, I guess, and facilities in support thereof says that it could be somewhat limiting on the building in that it would have to be law enforcement activities as opposed to any activity we so choose.
Well, I wouldn't, I wouldn't look at the in facilities in support thereof, and the in facilities in support thereof, I would use that to qualify the building. I wouldn't use it to qualify prosecutorial efforts or law enforcement. It's a facility supporting the building. The prosecutorial efforts and law enforcement, those are qualifying the building.
And I guess that's what to some extent I'm saying is, I mean, I do primarily want it to be the district attorney's office, but I don't want the court to be limited as to who we put in that building. Now, I know that we may have a little disagreement on that, but I really, if we decided for whatever reason that we wanted to put facilities office in there because we had to move somebody out, I want to be able to do that. And I mean, one of the things that I did ask, and the staff did do, I mean, and I've heard you say you really want it to be limited to the DA's office, but as we did a survey of the other counties, it's not. We would be well, Travis County is the only one that currently limits, that their DA has a building all into themselves.
Can we advance it to the slide? Thank you.
I mean, we're primarily, but I just don't want to tie the court's hands as if they want to put, if for whatever reason they need to put somebody else in that building. And what I hear you saying is that as long as we have debt, that could be a limiting factor.
Yes. As long as you have debt, the language that you have drafted is a limiting factor. Now, there could be some reasonable changes in circumstances if all crime disappeared in Tarrant County. I don't think the taxpayers or anyone else
would even have to worry about that.
Expect you to leave the building unoccupied if that were to pass. But for general purposes, yes, how we describe the building is going to limit its use.
Okay, Sharon, talk to me.
Can you put back up that first, the alternate?
Nope.
Never looking at
I know, I'm sorry.
No, the other one.
going to alternate A or B?
The one that says 101,
Alternative 2.
okay. And you had one that was
The
shorter
ballot
version.
language.
The ballot language is right there.
The ballot, that one, thank you.
Okay, so Sharon, I mean, let's talk about what I've just indicated. I mean, I want to be flexible, and I want the court to have the flexibility to be able to control what happens within their buildings. We've always done that, and we've always said that, and I'm afraid, I don't know, tell me why that's not going to be, why this may not be limited. You're going to have 2 extra floors, at least in the beginning.
Yes, to provide for growth. So let me start with, and I didn't look at other counties, I looked at our counties, and when we've had specific ballot language for specific buildings, can I just start here and pass it around?
Sure.
For example, except when it was a justice center for the courts, it wasn't a vague justice center building. And so our previous jail facilities, it's jail. Juvenile justice, it's justice, medical examiner. This is a specific purpose building, and I understand the need for flexibility. I also realize that where we're talking about locating it is very near the sheriff's department and their employees in that facility. And I've actually talked to the sheriff about this briefly. You know, as we look forward, going forward, I think that we're going to see more task force involvement. We've got the auto theft task force now. We're going to have an increase in trafficking enforcement. To say that we're going to limit it to prosecution, for me, is very broad. And for prosecution and law enforcement is very broad. I think the most important thing is the original language left it open to be part of the courts. And I know that in some of the discussions, there was some idea about putting indigent defense in there. I would object to that because I think the lines have to be very clear between what the DA's office does as a litigant and what the courts do as a different branch of government. And that's actually how it was originally in Tarrant County. Back in the 80s, we had a separate building for the DA's office, separate from the courts building. And we would prefer that we get back to that because it's confusing. The public has a right to know that they're not, the DA's office is not a branch of the courts are not a branch of our office. And when they're all in the same building like we are now, I think it's confusing and it leads that kind of question about what are the roles of the different components. I actually have no problem if you say it's going to be the criminal district attorney's office and the county administrator's office. You know? It would be fun. I do have concerns that it be general court business.
Oh, goodness.
Because, and keep in mind that one of our big concerns is the security for the employees that we need to deal with. And the more business that goes on in there, if it's public kind of business like attorney appointments, defendants, witness, it does away with the original need for this building. So, but I understand the need for flexibility. That's why we included the language regarding providing space for prosecutorial efforts and other law enforcement activities. If you wanted to add other non-court related county business, I think it may require some, maybe for those 2 floors, we would have to ask the architects to build in a separate entrance and separate access.
Other thoughts or?
I am leaning towards alternate 2. The only thing that gives me a bit of pause is the unlikely event that we might at some point establish a public defender's office. The concept of a public defender's office is that it should have substantially equal resources as the prosecutor's office. Under this language, we'd have to build them a separate building.
Well, let me suggest that you would want those to be in two separate places, because if you're talking a public defender's office with defendants coming to meet their attorneys, they're not going to want the DA's office to know who's coming in, who's talking, what witnesses are coming, and our victims and witnesses are certainly not going to want to be exposed like that.
That makes sense. As I said, that's an unlikely event for us.
I appreciate this, but the things that are on here that are calling for special buildings are things that require special things. Jail facilities require bars and cells. Public health requires labs. Medical examiners. Labs. Court buildings do. But what concerns me about the potential limitation is that, mostly yours is office space. It's basically an office space. From that perspective, let's say we decide at some point in time that we're going to renovate or redo maybe this building, maybe even the criminal courts building, and we had to move somebody, then we're going to be limiting a future court and their ability to move people in there. And it may be courts, but again, as I look through the other large counties, just about every one of them, with the exception of Travis County, there's all kinds of other departments within the same building as where the DA's office is.
And I just saw that slide for the first time, and it looked to me, and I don't see it right now, but it looked to me like most of those other offices did not have courts in them. They had other departments of the county in them. So Dallas County is different. They have the courts, but they were planned that way from the beginning. And of course, the Tim Curry building was not. It was planned to be a criminal court building with DA's offices, and it ended up being criminal, civil, and pretty much everything. So this would be a fresh start. The most recent building was Travis County, and it was solely the DA's office. And I will tell you, the DAs and the judges don't even have the same ethical requirements about who we report to and those kinds of things. Well,
no, I'm not grinning for that. I'm just grinning for something that I'm not going to say.
It's just, thanks. It is different. It's just different. And I listened to a police officer the other day who actually thought the DA's office was part of the courts. It's just not. And the separation that is provided by having a separate building is important. It's important because it says to the public the integrity of this system. We are a litigant. We're not making decisions about bonds. That's not what we do. But if we're all in the same building, it doesn't make any sense to anybody. So
I agree with what you're saying, and you make a very strong argument on the courts and it being viewed as one when you're there. But again, what I'm trying to avoid is tying our hands to the point to where if it became a point that we did want to renovate someplace, that we couldn't temporarily move a department, something that wasn't specifically related to the sheriff's department or investigations or things like that. We couldn't put facilities in there. We couldn't put administration in there. We couldn't put anything else in there. And so we're sitting there with 2 floors unoccupied, and we can't do anything with them.
And I've heard I actually have thought about the renovation of this building, which I understand is long overdue. I can't imagine that there's anything in this building that wouldn't be fine down there.
And that's all I'm trying to say is
I'm
I
concerned
want to
about
leave that deal.
I am not okay. And the problem for me is indigent defense, public defender, court clerks, anything from the courts getting into the DA's office. And let me suggest to you, we're going to be growing fast enough that I don't know that it's going to be that long.
But if that were to be a decision that some future court wanted to make, it would be whoever the DA was at that time to come down and to make that argument. But at least it wouldn't tie a future court's hands as in their efforts to try to most effectively and efficiently use the space that we have to save potential taxpayer dollars from having to.
Okay.
I mean, all it is, it allows you to come down. Anybody's always allowed to come down and talk to us about what they feel like is best.
So then my question is going to be, do we need to go ahead, if that's the way you go, then do we need to go ahead and start talking to the architect, because those buildings would have to have a separate entrance, separate parking for security purposes?
I don't think they have to. I mean, I hear security, and everybody, when we get to any point in the deal, everybody uses the word security, and I know it's important, and we felt so strongly about it is that we took the security off this building a long time ago. And I think it's important in certain areas, but I mean, I think it can always be the crutch that we use to say, okay, we're going to do all this special. And I'm just not sure. I feel like I think certainly some security is important, but I wouldn't suggest that it needs to be a separate entrance.
Yeah, I've been admonished in the past about talking about specific security problems in this public forum.
Well, and I do that, and I know that the last attorney that we had killed in this county was a good friend of mine. So I appreciate that. But Commissioner Fickus, I apologize. You were going to say something.
No, well, I would hate to see us go put in extra entry points into a building on the chance that we might need to relocate some people while we're doing construction on some other building for a short period of time. I think that's wasted money. I feel comfortable with this. I think it gives us leeway to do some things. Maybe not everything, but you can't go down to the jail and do everything. You can't go to the medical examiner's office and do everything and put anything and everything that you might, that you want to have the ability to put into here. There's limitations on every building we have in this downtown area because of a lot of different reasons. There's limitations. So not every building works for every use, and we have a lot of buildings that are specifically used for certain things, and I see this as just one of those buildings. I'm good.
Surely there's a way
that to
to
$116 million, the alternate two.
May I also remind you that when the DA's office leaves the Tim Curry Criminal Justice Center, we will vacate portions of almost every floor. So it's 9 stories, and we're on 6 of those floors. So when we vacate that, as far as moving people around to do construction, I think that is not going to be a problem. I mean, I'm not a construction person, but it makes sense to me that when you vacate that much space, that you'll be able to make a lot of changes without moving courts over to the DA's office or court services to the DA's office. Having said that, I absolutely understand the need to have additional county departments, just not court services, defense services. It literally needs to be, in my opinion, that's separate. So maybe it's for...
So I agree with Commissioner Fickus's position on this. I'm curious, though, is there any compromise that would allow for the greatest amount of flexibility, but still serve your purpose of keeping the courts very separate and apart from the prosecutor's office.
So, what we can possibly do, you have various options open to you now. Hearing what the court has said and working with the DA's office, this is not something we need to approve today. We have another court meeting we have 2 court meetings before we have to vote on the proposition. If you would like for us to take it back, hearing what you said, working with the DA's office, see if we can craft some language and bring it back to you that would potentially satisfy everything that's been said, we'll be more than happy to do that.
I think that's a good idea, and it might include adding something to the effect of improving and equipping a criminal district attorney office building to provide space for prosecutorial efforts and for other law enforcement activities not related to courts and court-related activities.
I would be fine with that language.
So maybe we say not just
Non-court,
law enforcement, just basically we wouldn't have to put in there, and for other law enforcement activities, we could just say for other activities with its non-court, non-judicial.
There's some language out there that we can agree to. Y'all get together and find it.
Give us a week and we'll bring this one. I would ask you though, does the court feel comfortable with the 116?
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Fickens, are you okay with that? Commissioner Johnson, are you okay with the 116?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. We'll get together. Okay. All right, so we will bring this back next week for discussion.
And again, I think it's important that we remember that we're only limited for as long as we have debt associated with that.
That's correct.
And then, I guess here's the bean counter in me. Do we, as far as in repayment of the debt, does it have to be, could we designate that the debt is to first pay off bonds associated with the criminal district attorney's office building, or is it something that would be over the life of the bonds?
So, and Jonathan, I'll try to answer that question, and I think I know the answer, but you have 2 different propositions. So when you vote on those propositions, when you go out and borrow, you're going to have to borrow specifically for each one of those propositions. That's my take. I believe that's correct, is it not?
But then we'll be paying off, the amortization will be on both, and both will be treated as a 40-year or whatever X number of years we use to go over that, 20 or 30, okay.
We probably won't break it up into separate issues, but we'll have to track within each issuance. We will be doing a tracking that allocates within each issuance. If, let's say you do $5 million worth of bonds, and we would allocate $3 million of that to the transportation package and $2 million of that to the criminal courts. Now, I think what you're asking is within that, could we say that of the $2 million allocated to the court, to the criminal district attorney building, could that be considered paid off faster within the maturity schedule? And the answer is, beg your pardon?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Okay, that's all right. So you'll work on that, bring it back to us next week.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, if we can now go to the regular agenda. And we're going to go into the administrator's office. As we did last week, the item number 1, we have provided information to the court in your packet on Friday, and again today, as it relates to some of the general discussion as it relates to item number 1. We do not have a slide presentation for that, but we stand ready to answer any questions that the court may have at this time on that particular item. I will tell you that as part of this, though, we are going to ask Mr. Tenasia to come forward and to present his health update, which will cover a lot of the questions that you may have dealing with the coronavirus. So if there's,
Excuse me, Mr. Maine, is this item number 1 where we would discuss the mental health jail diversion center?
we also have as a briefing item, the American Rescue Plan Act.
Okay.
That's what we
That's where
discussed
we
it
would
under
discuss that.
last week.
Okay, fine.
So if there's any questions that we might entertain from the court as it relates to item 1 before Mr. Tenasia makes his presentation.
I do have one, is just with the conclusion of our agreement with UNT being the 31st, then I'd like in a week or so after that is just to have a complete report out of what all was completed under that agreement.
Very good. I know that UNT is preparing one of those documents, may have concluded it already, and whenever we get within a week or so, we'll bring that back to you, court, maybe in 2 weeks.
Okay,
That's okay.
that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, great. If there's no further questions as relates to item 1, then we're going to ask Mr. Tenasia to come forward and make his presentation concerning health-related issues.
Good morning, court members.
Morning, Vinny.
Here for my quick briefing again, and I don't see my little, there we go. Thank you, sir. All right. So COVID is sort of the main story right now, and we're again surging, obviously. Every day you see 400 or 500 cases being added. Our total count is now above 270,000 cases, 3,619 deaths reported total in Tarrant County so far. And our hospitalizations continue to trend up in the entire North Texas area. Tarrant County is no exception. Unfortunately, we're leading by numbers, not by percentage points, because some of the smaller counties don't have that much capacity, but by numbers, we've got quite a bit. We have 458 cases in the hospitals, and that's about 10.23% of our hospital capacity. The Trauma Service Area E, which is a 19-county region, is at 7.23% capacity. The total people in the hospital there are 1,146. But as you can see, a lot of that, almost a little bit over 1/3 of that is in Tarrant County.
Back
Yes,
up
sir.
just a minute.
Yes, sir.
So we're at 7.23%,
For the Trauma Service Area E. Yes, sir.
and the level that triggers response is 15%?
Yes, but I got clarification from the DA's office because I was still under that impression that GA 32, where there was automatic triggers, was still good, but apparently there's been updates to the orders. So there's a GA 34, 35, and 36. One of them took away some of that automatic response. And the judge may have a comment on that, but because it's going to fall under his authority. But after the 15%, and you wait a week, then the state will not take any action. I think they allow local county judges to take some action. Judge, did you want to say something?
Basically, there's the only action that could be taken if we got up there and stayed there for 7 days is we could limit the occupancy somewhere between 100% and 50%. We could go no lower than 50%, and we can't do anything with masks for businesses, for individuals. We can't do anything except we can't do anything about large gatherings. All we can do is basically ratchet down the occupancy requirements for businesses. And if we can, I don't see that being
So basically, we've got no tool.
No tools. So it can get to whatever it gets to, and we still have no tools.
Exactly. And then, changing guidance, obviously, there's media activity abuzz this morning. There's an announcement coming from the CDC in the afternoon. Apparently, 3 p.m. Eastern, they're going to talk about bringing back mask guidance for vaccinated and unvaccinated. Details will be available in the afternoon, but the idea is that in an indoor setting, when the surge is on, it doesn't hurt to wear a mask. And similarly, they're going to talk about school-related guidance because there's been a lot of confusion and concern about whether masks should be used or not. And different states are handling it differently, different schools are handling it differently. So I think that's going to be part of that discussion. We'll see what the details are, but there is some guidance. Again, this is guidance only. This is not a federal decree of any kind. It's not within their authority. It's handled by the states and local governments.
So guidance by the CDC does not...
Non-binding.
Is non-binding on
Yes,
the
sir.
governor of the state of Texas.
That is correct.
Yes, sir. All right, so so the situation, as you can see on the charts, the bars are certainly starting to go up in the end over there on the epi curve. Still a far cry from what we saw as a major surge that developed back in the fall into December and January. So it's not like everything's lost and the vaccines didn't work. The vaccines worked great. We flattened the curve. We have just, come up against a variant, and then, of course, all these other activities have happened. A lot of, normalcy has occurred while there was still a lot of population that was not vaccinated. And as you can see, as you bring people together, some amount of disease activity is going to pick up. There's a silver lining. I'm really trying to find something positive. We did go from 1.29 R0 rate to 1.22, so there's a minor slowdown, hopefully a harbinger of good news. Maybe we'll, not go crazy with cases, but we're hoping to see those numbers continue to either stabilize or decline. But the other indicators are still up. So, unless they all sync up together, I worry that one of them, giving me good news and 5 other telling me bad news is probably bad news. So that's where we are. So far, still 18% positivity rate. That's quite high. One of the things I wanted to point out, I know Commissioner Allen has asked a couple of times, there's a plan underway. Let me reassure you, we have ample testing across the county. It's just all set up by private sector. You can go to pharmacies, you can go to different dock-in-a-box type places where they have little container boxes sitting in a parking lot. But at the end of June, Texas Division of Emergency Management that had all these large drive-through testing sites, they had folded out because the volume was down so much they were seeing 20 people a day or less on some days. So we've asked them again, and they said no, they've kind of let go of all their contracts, and they don't see the need to come back within local jurisdictions to stand up testing sites again. So public health team working with Mr. Manius' office, we're going to put a rotating schedule, and we'll be hopefully working with y'all's teams to see if we can find locations either at your sub-courthouses or other county facilities where we can rotate our teams. And the idea would be a mobile team will go 1 day a week, fixed rotation, we'll be there. People coming for services if they want to get tested, something happened in a county office, they want to get tested, or if the public just wants to come there and wants to find a free testing option supported by local government, we'll have it there. And we'll let the data tell us, is that a worthwhile effort or not? But for now, we're going to try to start this hopefully, shortly soon, because the surge is on, and we want to make sure there's not a barrier in place. So we'll be trying to do that.
Thank you for that update.
Go back, please.
Yes, sir.
Here's the thing that I think, if we point out nothing else, if we look at that bottom line, the first box that we see is for the whole region, TSAE region. The second box is Tarrant County. So back in July of last year, we had a surge, and a lot of people went into the hospital. And this year, we had a surge.
Yep.
And only half as many people went into the hospital.
Yes.
And as we're being told continuously, those folks in the hospitals didn't get a vaccine. And so I would say to folks, this is further evidence of the importance of getting the vaccine, because last July, we had no opportunity to get a vaccine. People were in the hospital. This year, people have gotten the vaccine, and if you didn't get the vaccine, you're ending up in the hospital, but half as many people are in the hospital this time of year, this year, as were last year when the vaccine was not available. So that is a further proof and just should be an encouragement, get the vaccine.
I totally agree, sir. Well said. All right, so switching gears to RSV for a second. Last week I had mentioned that the state data was starting to take a little break, and we're starting to see that here in Tarrant County. The ER visits are still sort of in a uptrend, but the positivity rate is certainly starting to come back down. We had peaked at about 50% positivity rate, and we're down to about 40% positivity rate. So I'm hoping that those ER visits will start to slow down and come down over the next couple of weeks. Again, it's very unfortunate, but it's off season. Again, all these measures work. When people wear masks, they stay away from others and be careful. Things do get better on a lot of disease fronts, and as we get back to normal, a lot of these diseases that we just kind of deal with sometimes come back, and this one's been a pretty harsh outbreak all across southern United States and Texas in particular. So what should we continue to do? Again, get vaccinated. I mean, that's the key message. That is our best way out of this pandemic. That is the one tool that we have that really works. And again, layer your strategies. I mean, there's no harm in wearing a mask. There's no harm in avoiding large crowds, especially if you're unvaccinated. Try not to go there because you don't know out of that large crowd who's got what. So don't put yourself at risk and don't put others at risk. Again, these are simple things. These are not permanent measures. Layer your strategies, and I think we can get through this without much damage. So here's an update on our vaccine situation. So I know there was discussion last week about data gaps between what we were able to show on our dashboard and what DSHS was showing on their dashboard. And we had been working with them for quite a long time, several weeks, a couple, 3 months in the making. We did get a large file. We're almost caught up. They gave us close to 400,000 additional records. So our numbers are looking pretty good right now. We have about 44% of the county that has had at least one dose, and 39% of the county that has had 2 doses. And I know Commissioner Brooks had been in particularly concerned about certain zip codes that were showing very low vaccination rates. They're still lagging compared to the rest of the county, but the rates are quite improved. I think we went from under 10% to above 30% in most of those areas. Now, 30% is not anything to write home about, but it's better than where we were, and it was a data issue that DSHS was able to rectify. What we know is there's still a 50,000 dose gap, and we're still working with them to reconcile on why that is happening. And, we'll hopefully catch up here soon. Commissioner, you had a question or comment? No, sir? Okay.
Not at this time.
I would just say that I know we've talked about a bunch of pop-up clinics and that, as people have called, you have been more than willing to get out and to help in that regard. And I think we need to continue to focus. It does not need to be us that is trying to lead the way because our social media guru has indicated that it needs to be other leaders within the community. They have a tendency not to trust government. So if we can get church leaders, community leaders, whomever, to really encourage, to set up an event and encourage the people they influence to come out, then we'll be there to give them a shot.
Absolutely.
And when I say we, it may be THR, it may be it may be public health, it may be Arlington, Fort Worth, it could be any number of EMSs, it could be nurses that are working maybe in schools. I don't know what it'll be, but we've got the people to give the vaccines. It could be pharmacies. We can get it done if we'll just get people to bring groups together. We're looking for back to school events right now. But we're going to focus on zip codes, and I would encourage each one of us to do that. But I think more effectively it's going to come from church leaders and from other community or group leaders.
Yes, sir. Talking about
in that regard, let me just say that I am not going to give up on an effort to reach out to those underserved communities and try to have an intensive effort to get shots in arms. Commissioner Allen and I are going to work on a strategy, and we'll bring it back to this court and see if we can't get y'all to agree.
Well, I don't know that we disagree, Roy. What I was saying, well,
this
you
is
said
a
that we agree.
specific, this will be a specific effort that you have not seen before.
Well,
and in order for us to do it, you're going to need to agree. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and I don't know, okay, but I want to just say, here's some of the efforts that I'm making. I'm talking with the Catholic Diocese to see about certain zip codes in certain areas. As it turned out, I asked them who the contact was that we should contact with. It was some lady named Casey Whitley, who happens to be my daughter-in-law. But we're going to focus on zip code type things or area type things. You don't need our permission to do that. Public health, every time I've called Vinny,
I will
he said,
need your permission because there's going to be a cost associated with it. And that cost is going to have to be allocated by this court. I can't just go out and start spending your money.
well, okay. I mean,
that is a discussion
better talk
for
with
a
her
future
before
day.
you talk with the court.
I'm going to talk to whoever I need to talk to get permission to do what it is I want to do, Judge.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just saying, let's move forward as rapidly as we can.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate your willingness to say, you call me and I'll be there.
Yes, sir. And thank you for your team to help us out, because our team's stuck in the operation, so sometimes the outreach part gets a little, tiring. So we appreciate the fresh set of eyes that are helping us. So thank you. One thing I wanted to point out, there's been a discussion last week about looking at eligible population so that we can at least compare the data to DSHS and Dallas and other places. Now, my team had a lot of heartburn because the entire population is the entire population that we need to worry about, but we understand. So looking at 12 and older, to give you comparison platform, the county is at 54% with 1 dose and 48% with 2 doses, so or completed series. So that's where the numbers would start to become comparable to other places like Dallas or the DSHS dashboard, because they're showing the numbers that way. We've always said the vaccination, and we're following strict definition how we do vaccination rates for all other diseases. This is no exception. The underlying population is your entire population. So that's why now we're starting to show both. That way people can at least have a quick comparison. But our recommendation would be look at the entire population, because eventually we're all going to be eligible and everybody's getting sick. I mean, it's not like a certain age group is being accepted. So the entire population is the denominator. We have
44% under the 933 is everybody in the county.
Yes, sir.
And the 54% are just those that are eligible to get it right now.
Yes, sir. That is correct. All right. So just wanted to point that out, and then these numbers are improved as well. These are on our dashboard if you have any particular questions.
I'm going to ask you to go back again
yes, sir.
time. I got to ask more questions. If 54% have got 1 and 48% have got 2, if all the 54% had gotten 2, we're over 100%. So the 48
no.
included in the 54?
Yes, sir. Yeah, because there's always that gap, right? They're either behind or some people just didn't come back. So the real number that I would look at is that 48%, because that's the completed series, right? They're fully protected. Their series is done.
So in effect, I
yes,
can read
sir.
that as 6% haven't come back.
Either they haven't come back or they're still in progress, like 3 to 4 weeks behind.
Because they got
yes,
the
sir.
first shot and they're waiting.
Yeah, they're waiting. And a lot of that is that. The completion series, I mean, in our numbers, we're seeing people coming back. I mean, they're motivated. When they get it, they come back. Okay. All right. So, and like I said, this is the more completed version. All the numbers improved, but if y'all have any specific questions, we can address those offline on any of those details. And then here's the clinic schedule. As you know, that in July, we're kind of trying to phase out a lot of the COVID-specific mass vaccination efforts, because in August, the big push is going to be the back to school effort. But I did want to show you the pop-up clinic schedule. It's out of our internal Outlook calendar, but as you can see, it's staying pretty busy. So we had last few weeks, about 3 weeks, I'm showing you up top, and at the bottom is the upcoming second week, 2 weeks in August. Variety of things happening, and it comes in a variety of different ways. There's online, people can book a registration, like I want to host a pop-up clinic at my business or my school. They can call our hotline. We have specific people assigned who primarily coordinate all of this. That way all the questions are answered, like how much space do you have? Is it a drive-through event? Is it an indoor event, outdoor event? So all of those things are answered, and then teams are assigned, and they go handle these pop-up events. Some of them are back-to-school events. Some of them are other. Some of them here, even though they're here, I recommend that people work with the event organizer, because some of these listed here are private-only events, meaning they wanted a closed point of dispensing just for their workplace. They're not going to want public to come to those locations, so just don't go and look at this calendar and go somewhere is the note for the public.
What's the difference in the green, the gray, and the...
Oh, that's their internal coding. Grays are usually like second dose events, and then greens are usually the first ones, and I think some of the red ones that you see are their internal notes, like if they have an all-day training that they're booking out or things like that.
But these are things that specifically public health is taking care of.
Yes, sir.
We know in addition to that Arlington and Fort Worth and many other
They're doing
PHR and many other organizations
Yes.
have been scheduled to do things within that same time frame.
Yes, they have, and some of this is like, so we don't put it on our calendar, because if we got double booked or triple booked, we've had partners help with that. And one of the events, the partner was supposed to pick up, and then at the last minute something happened, so we picked up. There was an anime convention in Arlington over this last weekend. We went there, and it wasn't, the vaccine coverage wasn't that great. I think we got 12 doses out of the event, but we'll take it. And then one final thing I was going to mention about these, and it's escaping. In August, so there will be pop-up events that will continue. So that's not a problem, because we have pop-up teams. But I wanted to remind again, the focus is back-to-school events. Now, last year, due to the pandemic, we brought everything centralized into one location. It was at the Ridgemar Mall location. So that's going to be our main location again. But as the pandemic has backed off and there's a lot of need for back-to-school efforts, we have brought a rotating schedule back, in addition to the Ridgemar Mall location, which will be Monday through Saturday. So Monday through Friday, I think 9 to 6, Saturdays 9 to 2. And then we will have 1 week at Resource Connection, 1 week at our Arlington clinic, 1 week at the Watauga clinic, and 1 week at the Lake Worth clinic. So it will be a rotating schedule. All vaccines will be available, back-to-school vaccines for kids, COVID shots for eligible folks, anything else that people may need to catch up on, we will have all of that available. So I want to encourage everybody highly, let's get this done. School's going to start. Let's not have some other outbreak because kids are not caught up. Let's get them caught up and get back to school safely. And here's the back-to-school events and all the other things in August. The calendar is going to see a lot of pop-up clinics that we were doing regularly are, ending because they were COVID vaccine-only events. And then just the ad hoc clinics that are like, one-time events, or all of those will continue on.
Well, and so like as an example would be the clinic that we've had, I guess for the last 6 weeks at the Mansfield sub-courthouse, right? We're wrapping that up. Obviously people will be directed where they could get their second shot so they wouldn't have to come back to Mansfield. But I understand needing to prioritize the back to school immunizations. And also just, even if we have, like last week when I visited with the team in Mansfield, I think, one day there were very few people, another day there were a couple dozen. I don't want us to minimize the couple dozen or the 12 or the 10, because that's still one more person who's vaccinated.
Exactly.
And that still equates to hopefully greater health for our community.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. All right, that's all I have, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
The only other comment I'd make, and it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, some folks, would say, okay, wait a minute, there's not near as many positive cases as there was. If you go back and look at that same chart for just a second, see if you can what you'll see is the positivity rate for the test that we're doing, the positivity rate is almost identical. It's 18.76 at July a year ago.
Yes, sir.
And it's 18.46 this July.
And hospitalizations are
and
half.
Hospitalizations are greater than half.
Yep.
So get the vaccine.
All right, thank you.
Members of the court, we can now go to item number 2 under the administrator
Why don't
section.
we take a short recess? It was a good try. We're back.
Okay, thank you. Members of the court, if we can go now to item number 2 under the administrator section. Ms. Camarillo is here to address the court.
Good afternoon, Judge and Commissioners.
Hello.
So with the American Rescue Plan Act, additional emergency rental assistance funds were approved, and with those came some additional and updated Treasury guidelines. Those guidelines, along with some other internal processes and procedural updates, have necessitated this policy update today. So I'm going to very briefly review the changes in the policy and then seek your approval for the policy as presented. So the first change is that ERA 2 is what I'll call it, round 2, approved an additional 3 months of assistance for individuals already being assisted through ERA 1. So that would bring the total months or maximum months of assistance to 18. So we have incorporated that into our policy. Additionally, HUD every year updates the area median income limits. That happens around June, and so those numbers have been updated. From 2020 to 2021, there was actually about a 0.5 percentage point decrease in area median income, so that's reflected in the chart within the policy. The third thing is we established a definition of reasonableness as it concerns late fees. We do pay late fees through our program. So we have established the same definition that Texas Property Code establishes, which is 10% of rent for properties with 4 or less units and 12%, I'm sorry, I did it backwards, 12% for or less units, 10% for properties with more than 4 units. And so we're able to talk to the landlords then if we see late fees that are higher than that and remind them that doesn't fall within the property code. The fourth thing, and I'll talk a little bit longer about this one, is duplication prevention. So we've talked before about the state of Texas and their Texas Rent Relief Program. The state of Texas continues to utilize their ERA funds to serve Tarrant County as well as all other counties who received funding. And so that presents an issue with duplication. That has become increasingly burdensome to staff as the program has moved on and we're seeing more applicants. And so because of that, we've had to work with the auditors pretty extensively to come up with an internal duplication prevention process. And I will not go through that because it is hairy and detailed, but there is a diagram as an addendum to the policy that we're presenting today. Yes, sir.
What vehicle is the state of Texas using to disperse their rental assistance funds in Tarrant County? What agency Where's the money coming from?
So they're using the same funding that we received from Treasury. States also received ERA funding, both rounds 1 and 2. And the state of Texas is contracted with Horn, a consultant, to run their program. And they're using software very similar to ours. The Treasury did not preclude state agencies from serving areas like Tarrant County who also received emergency rental assistance. So that's where the potential for duplication really comes from.
So the state's rental assistance funds are coming through a private sector consulting firm?
No, sir. They're coming from the U.S. Treasury just like ours. They're using a consultant to administer their program.
I think you just said the same thing I did.
Possibly.
So the question is, they apply to the state, and then Horn works the application for the state, and who disperses the money to the landlord?
The state.
The state.
How do they apply to the state?
They have an online application system like ours.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So that's caused quite a bit of burden on our staff, but we believe that we're in a good place. There is still a risk of duplication. The policy and the process that's outlined within our updated policy, we feel gives us the best chance at preventing that duplication. But the auditor does understand that there's still some risk. We do not want to prevent. We're trying to give our residents as much opportunity as they can to get assistance without duplicating. So that's the fourth really change that you'll see in that policy. And the last one is that ERA 2 allows for 15% of the funds to be used for housing stability. That is anything from casework to legal fees. And because of that change, we are looking at ways to partner with other agencies, the first being legal aid, to come up with a program utilizing ERA funds that will allow us to increase the presence in the JP courts, to increase outreach to those who have filed for eviction. The difference, or the main difference with ERA 2, is that it doesn't have to be COVID related in terms of housing stability services. So again, it's a small carve out. It's 15% of the award, so it doesn't pertain to our the program that we're administering now, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, but it does allow us to create a separate program. So I'm working, with the auditor's office on those guidelines, with Janet Denton and the alternate dispute team, and then again with legal aid to try to find a way to utilize those funds. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer those. Otherwise, I'd request approval of the updated policy as presented.
Move approval of the updated
Second.
Policy as presented.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
So I do have one question, Kristen. Is a few months ago you had presented information on kind of who were the applicants and who were we helping with our program?
Mm-hmm.
Just at some near future point, can you provide an update on? I mean, it may be this relatively be the same, but if not, I'd be curious to see what the differences are.
Sure, I'll do that. Thanks.
Next, we have an item that we pulled off the consent under Budget and Risk Management, item number 2. We have an audience participation. Thomas Torlinski.
Torlinkowski.
Yeah, that sounds good too. Wishes to speak, so please come forward at this time. Please, again, repeat your name and the address, and then you have 3 minutes to make any comments you'd like to make.
All right. Thank you, Judge. My name's Thomas Torlinkowski. I live at 1515 6th Avenue in 76104, the lowest life expectancy in Tarrant County. I wanted to comment on the risk management aspect of the agenda today, specifically on the 2 claims. These are really small claims, and I can see why it's pretty straightforward for the committee to recommend paying these claims are around $1,000. About
1/3 the amount of money that we pay the county administrator every single day. I mostly wanted to focus on the fact that the county has chosen to be self-insuring, which is an issue that I believe will balloon. Last time I spoke before the Commissioner's Court, I talked about the difference between price and cost. And by self-insuring, we've also chosen not to carry an insurance policy, which a lot of large metro counties do. The problem with that is that it does not insulate us from large federal civil rights lawsuits, including the ones that potentially are in the pipeline or are in the pipeline addressing this county's lack of civil rights respect. The two biggest departments that are at risk for the county, it seems to me, are all the law enforcement aspects, both the constables and certainly the sheriff's department and the jail, where a number of civil rights violations occur regularly, the Commissioner's Court, to the lesser degree the constable's office, and now even the district attorney's office. So part of my point is that while we're debating the necessity of $116 million highly secured palaces, are we actually providing oversight to two different departments that are the lion's share of the budget? I mean, the Sheriff's Department is $152,390,000 proposed. You have a lot of levers there. Just making the Sheriff's Department and the sheriff individually more accountable is a routine procedure at 253 other counties in Texas. My point is that if we had an insurance policy, if we were covered, as expensive as those premiums are, as risk management tells me, we'd also have some form of oversight, because part of the point of adjudicating both civil rights claims or little claims like car accidents is to create process improvement, to make the circumstances and the conduct of our employees better, to change the policies. That's true with a civil rights lawsuit too. I could rattle off about 5 major potential class action suits that could be litigated against the county currently, including against you, Judge, and certainly against the 3 deputies that committed official oppression and assault in the jail, or on behalf of the thousands of inmates that are currently in the jail unadjudicated for 17 months. Many of them wouldn't even get sentenced to 17 months. So for what it's worth, we need to completely reassess the risks that the county's taking, including little claims and large claims, because we have no system that comes back and creates improvement or process improvement or improved behavior.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Members of the court, we recommend and we request that the Commissioner's Court approve the claims that have been recommended by the Risk Management Board.
Move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Hatter.
Good afternoon, members of the court. We got 3 items today in the Elections Department. First one we have is we're requesting the approval of the appointments of the county election judges and alternate election judges. This has to be done annually on July 31st. On July 31st for a period of 2 years. We're requesting them. So this appointment would go all the way to July 31st, 2023.
These appointments follow our established policies.
Yes, sir. They are, as required by the code, based on lists provided by the 2 parties, and they've agreed on, because we're vote centers, where we're going to have a Republican judge and a Democrat judge.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Next item I have is a request for the approval of the appointment of the ballot board presiding judge and alternate judge for the November 2nd, 2021 uniform election date. The 2 people that have been nominated by the parties are for the presiding judge, David Lambertson from the Republican Party, and for the alternate judge, Kat Cano from the Democratic Party.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes. Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
The third and last item we bring today is the approval of the appointment of the Central Count Station staff for the November 2nd, 2021 election. This group is a group of 5 people that has to be appointed by the Commissioners Court. The presiding judge, same person as before from the Republican Party, David Lambertson. In the same case as with the alternate judge, Kat Cano from the Democratic Party. And then the technical staff that supports them would be the station manager, that would be myself, the counting station tabulation supervisor, and the assistant tabulation supervisor are 2 of our staff members, Stacy B. Hammer and Paul Benavides.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Otter. Ms. Glenn, whoops, looks like it's Ange.
Move to
And
receive
let's
and
wait a
file
minute.
personnel agenda.
Let's hold on item 1 until maybe after the end of her report.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning, or afternoon.
Afternoon, sorry. So the first item after the personnel agenda, we're looking for approval of fiscal year 2022 compensation recommendations. I do have some extra handouts if it will help anybody. Yes.
Please.
Yes.
Ready.
So I'm going to go through the page starting FY 2022 compensation recommendations. Much of this page is very similar to previous years, so I'm not going to belabor a lot of these points. I wanted to point out a few things, though. Under structure adjustments, I'm going to get to the specific structure adjustments after we go through this page. The way those do work, though, when approved, we have minimum implementation. That's effective October 1st for our non-law enforcement employees. Anybody who's below the new hire-in rates would be eligible to move to the new hire-in rates, and those are awarded automatically unless departments notify me otherwise. Similarly, but differently, maximum implementation for law enforcement employees. These are also effective October 1st. All law enforcement salaries are also adjusted by the amount of the structure adjustment. Again, these happen automatically unless notified otherwise. Merit increases, same as before. We're recommending a 3% merit pool with a range of 0 to 6% for merit increases, effective January 1st, 2022. Our full-time classified employees are eligible if they were hired before August 1st. And our employees who do not receive 3% through merit because they are maxed out may be eligible for a lump sum. The total of the merit increase and the lump sum cannot exceed 3%, same as previous years. Step increases, these are awarded on review dates as usual. The second point that you see there about lump sums, if our next item or one of our future items is approved, these actually won't be pertinent because all of our structures will have moved by 3%. Project employees, unclassified employees, we're looking at 3% here. Again, awarded October 1st unless departments tell us otherwise. Reclassifications, those will work the same as previous years, effective October 1st. Employees will be eligible for a 5% increase or an increase to the higher-end rate, whichever is greater. General rules, I won't go through those, but the primary one, we need performance appraisals. The scores should be 2.95 or higher in order to get a merit or a step increase. With that, I'm going to flip to the next page, the FY 2022 structure adjustment recommendations. You heard Paul Golgowski last week talk about these in detail. Our recommendations are all the same here with the exception of the management structure. So what was recommended for the management structure, grades 7 and 8, were 4% increases, with the rest of them remaining at 0. In order to focus on our hiring capabilities, we're proposing that we turn the 0 to 2.5%. You know, this is a very small group. We have about 26, 27 positions in that group. This would affect one employee. So changing the 0 to 2.5%, as you'll see when we get to the cost page, has very minimal fiscal impact. What we'd also like to do is give you an additional recommendation for this management group. What we're looking at are the hiring rates for those assistant director and director positions. We filled quite a few of these lately, and what we've discovered is our hiring rates at 10% above minimum may not necessarily be terribly effective. So what we're looking at proposing is a 20% hiring rate for assistant directors, a 25% hiring rate for directors. This will prevent us from needing to go to the court for special permission. What's been lately, it seems like almost every time we fill an assistant director or director position, and allow us some flexibility to fill those positions at a higher rate. What you see on the next page is the cost of the FY 2022 compensation proposals. These are the Corn Ferry structure and the 3% merit proposals. The shaded areas that you see are the cost of the additional proposals for the management structures. So the total across all funds, excluding grants, with the proposals is about $12.95 million. With
and
that
includes those two items under additional items.
Yes, sir.
Consideration.
Yes, sir.
So will those numbers change if the court votes on the affirmative as it relates to the detention officer, 51 to 52?
Will they change? They'll change to some degree, yes. I would say they'll go up a little bit, but at the same time, the number typically goes down just because of turnover, retirements, so there will be an adjustment. I don't expect, Helen, significant? Not significant.
Because I think, wasn't that the same question you just asked?
No.
Okay.
He was asking about the management changes.
Okay.
Any other questions on that item?
Just generally speaking, how do we ensure that there's equity, gender equity in our pay structures?
For the most part, gender equity is something that we leave to the departments, which is something of an unsatisfactory answer. But every so often we do look at that, and particularly in comparison with our percentage of employees. So we're slightly more on the female side than we are the male side. We have a few more female employees than male employees. But to be honest, we don't do an in-depth analysis on that.
Okay. So we need to do that.
Yes, ma'am.
How would we go about doing that?
I think there are a variety of ways. We could certainly have somebody look at a study for us, or we can look across similar paid classes and do gender studies across those.
Okay.
I certainly don't want to hold up anything that we need to move forward with today, but we do need to do that. So.
Yes, ma'am.
I move approval of the recommendations.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I guess the other question, as we went through the law enforcement, there were several that you and I discussed about average. Do we feel like we've done anything to address into that difference, and how do we feel like we're going to do that, and what's the effect going to be?
We do. So the law enforcement recommendations range from 2.5, assuming we have grade 51s after today, and go up to 7%. So as our maxes raise by those percentages, our averages are going to raise both by the step and by the maximums. So our average pay is going to go up as each step goes up. I think we'll have a little bit more work to do next year. I didn't want to do anything huge this year because we do have this next item coming up that's going to do 3.6 something million worth of fiscal impact. So I think we're definitely making progress with that range of 2.5% to 7%.
After we've done that, and I really want to see how we're doing very specifically in those areas through 60 or whatever that was. That was, I guess it was close to through 60, wasn't it? 60 or 61 was where those law enforcement averages where we were so far below.
60 or 60.
They were probably around 55.
Right.
You know, they went up higher. Well, maybe they did. Maybe they did.
The top grade is 60 in law enforcement.
It is. And the survey only goes up to grade 55 positions. So on the survey, what you're most likely remembering, 54s and 55s.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions at this time?
You were talking about a grade or a dollar figure? You're talking about a dollar figure.
Well, I'm talking about, yes, if you looked at the law enforcement and you looked at we're doing great as far as minimums, we're doing great as far as maximums, but when it came to average, which is the actual pay that folks are getting, in some of those categories, the average pay, we were 15,000 below what Dallas County was paying.
Okay, I got you.
Okay, please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Our next item is a request to approve 2 extensions of project employment for the district clerk's office. Both of these employees have received a 1-year extension already. That was last year. If approved, there's no fiscal impact to the general fund, but rather to the records technology fund of approximately $103,000 and change.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Our next item is requesting approval of changes to the table of organization for the sheriff's office. This is requesting reclassification of the detention officer positions effective July 31st. We do believe and agree with the department that the scope of these positions has increased over the years, certainly in scope due to legislative changes, developments in the correctional best practice areas. So in order to assist with recruitment and retention, what we're looking to do is reclassify these grade 51 positions to grade 52. The salary calculations would fall within current salary administration guidelines, so that would work as normal. What we are requesting that you look at are review dates. This is getting a little bit into the minutia, but it is important. So we have grade 51As and grade 51B employees who were asking that their review date be changed along with the reclassification. So that would be changed to July 16th. We're asking that the remainder of the employees, 51C and above, remain the same as they are currently. The reason we're asking for those review date changes is because both the 51As and the 51Bs will map to 52A. That means that somebody who is an A currently, who's a shorter-termed employee, could potentially get a salary increase over a longer-term employee who's currently at step B. In order to prevent that from happening, the shorter-term employees getting a pay increase before your longer-term employees, we're asking for these review date adjustments, and they would change to next July 16th.
Okay.
So the cost...
And the cost for this?
I'm sorry?
What is the cost for this?
The FY 2021 cost to the general fund is about $603,000. To the commissary fund, about $2,900.
But that's just for the fiscal year that ends.
That's correct.
September 30th, 21. What's the annual cost?
The annual cost, we're looking at about $3.62 million annually.
Okay. I believe I was hearing a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. I really believe that this is a good thing. It will help the detention officers realize. I mean, I know they've had a very tough past 15, 16 months, and I think this is well deserved for them.
Along that same note, our next item is requesting approval of detention officer referral and recruitment programs. These you might more commonly refer to as referral bonuses, sign-on bonuses. We're calling them a little something different, but the short of it is that we are requesting the ability to assist in recruiting and retaining detention officer staff. As you know, as of yesterday, we had about 101 vacancies. It's just not tenable. So what we're looking for, I'm not going to go through all of the provisions of these programs, but with the referral program, again, you might think of those as referral bonuses. I'm going to refer to them as referral incentives. The program would become effective on August 1st. Applicants who are referred would have to be selected for hire into a full-time detention officer position. They would have to accept that job offer, and they would have to pass the state jailer certification exam, which typically happens about 4 weeks post-hire. At that point, the employee who made the referral would be eligible for a one-time payment of about $200. That would be subject to all normal deductions and payroll taxes. There is no limit to the number of referrals that an employee is permitted to make, but only one employee can get a referral for any one applicant. The only other thing that we're requiring is that applicants must identify who referred them on their application when that happens. Any questions on the referral program before I move over to the recruitment program?
I guess the only thing I want to be sure of, and I haven't read through this yet, so this could be for any county employee. It doesn't have to be just someone in the jail.
We currently have it limited to the sheriff's office employees, but we can change that.
It needs to be, at least in my opinion, it needs to be anybody and not just someone in the jail.
Okay.
Or in the sheriff's department.
We do also have some restrictions about people
Couldn't be
within,
elected officials.
Couldn't be elected officials, anyone in the hiring chain of command or in the HR area of the department, as that is their job to fill positions.
Okay.
So this question will be for, really for both programs. So I'll let you describe the second one first.
Okay.
I'll let you describe the second one now.
Okay. The recruitment program, again, commonly referred to as sign-on bonuses, also effective August 1st. Same sort of process. Applicants must be selected for hire into a full-time jailer position, detention officer position, accept the job offer, and pass the state jailer certification examination to be eligible for the first payout. For the second payout, they must continue to work in a full-time detention officer position for the duration of their probationary period. That typically lasts for a year. So what we're looking at is a total of $1,500, again, payable in two different payments. After the state examination, $750. After the probationary period, $750. Subject to payroll taxes as usual.
So the probation period for law enforcement is a year versus 6 months?
Correct.
Okay.
And this would be eligible for funding out of the ARPA?
Correct. We do anticipate ARPA covering the costs of both programs.
But so what about beyond that? Right, because the ARPA funds have an end date.
They do. We're hoping that we can staff up and not utilize these programs. These are not intended to be long-term programs. What we're hoping to do is incentivize enough people to come in that we can discontinue the programs entirely. And we will be looking at those probably every 6 months to a year after implementation to see what sort of effectiveness they've got.
I'd like for us to have an end date to start with.
Okay.
Especially if we aren't totally sure what the budgetary impact is going to be. I mean, I get obviously that we're needing to staff up, but I'm very uncomfortable with an open budget and a no end date.
Okay.
I agree.
So since we are using ARPA funds and not general revenue for this, I would suggest that we do something around 18 months. Because if you're going to pay, if someone's going to come on and they're going to get the first 750, then they're going to have to go through their probationary period, which is another year. So you want to have that. ARPA funds can be utilized for a 2-year period, and then in December 31st,
23. Well, if it's over at 24, why don't we just say December 31st, 2023? That'll cover the year probation, which would mean that the...
And if we need to come back, we can do that. And if we need to come back, if it's successful, and you all have that option to extend it if you want to.
We could extend it or terminate it if we decide to at any point in time. Okay.
I agree with that.
Do I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Oh, wait.
So we have I want to be sure I've got this right. We have a motion and a second to extend the program to all county employees, excluding those folks in the hiring process, as well as elected officials, and to put an end date on this program, on both of these programs, at December 31st, 2023.
Agreed.
Your boss has a question.
Actually, I'm just trying to get clarification, Judge. When you say extend to all employees, are you talking about both programs, or are you talking about one program? I want to make sure I'm clear.
Well, that's a good point, because I don't know that I want to encourage someone to leave your department to go to be work in the detention center.
So are you referring to just the referral?
I think it would be just the referral program.
And so again, we have not internally worked out the logistics of this being countywide. Again, the presentation, as Ange indicated, was specific for the Sheriff's Department. And so I want to make sure that we, and maybe Ange is a little bit more comfortable than I am. I'm a little bit uncomfortable at this point, not that I disagree, but I want to make sure that we have all of the logistics worked out in terms of how we would implement that countywide.
So you could bring that part
Yes.
back next week, and we could discuss that.
That would be my preference if Mr. Manius is in agreement.
That's fine. I do think, though, that what we were talking about was that the retention aspect, the $1,500 would be for detention officers, and the referral, the $200 would be for any employee that would refer someone into the detention officer program.
So those are the details y'all can work out between now and next week.
And I'd like to just add from a payroll perspective, because again, I'm on the back end of actually getting these payments out the door, is as we work through this process and to actually develop the procedures in the process, because there's a lot of moving parts here and a lot of dates and a lot of opportunities for things to get screwed up. These are not large amounts, but I'm just saying that we need to work through those processes as well. And if any of those processes become unmanageable or we have any issues, then we bring this back. We're certainly going to do everything we can to accommodate this program, but we really haven't looked at how it's going to work, because it just says that HR will do all these great things, but ultimately all that stuff rolls into payroll and we have to get it in the paycheck correctly.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So we'll take if y'all don't mind pulling your motions down, then we'll take action on that next week, or whenever they bring it back.
So then here's another question I'm going to ask now, even if the answer needs to be provided when you all bring this back, is the implications for the new state law and funding of law enforcement. So I want to make sure that we're sensitive to that, which I know we talked about that we will do that through the budget process, but this seems like given the at least the initial implementation of 18 months.
I do not believe that confinement officers are part of that defunding issue, but we'll get that answer for you.
So we're not going to take any action. So now that we have approved detention, 51s becoming 52s, we might receive and file the personnel agenda, which had all them going to.
So moved.
Second.
It doesn't have any of those actions on it currently. The personnel agenda is stuff we've already done, so you don't see any of those reclasses on this agenda.
The reclasses are implemented, they start July 31st.
We still need to approve the personnel agenda.
Yes.
So what are all
I got confused too.
these current positions under what I thought was our receive and file agenda shows all those 51s going to 52s?
That's associated with the actual reclass action. That's not the personnel agenda.
So then how are we, if it's not a part of the receive and file of the personnel agenda, how are we going to pay these people at 52s when there were 51s?
They'll be on the next, I don't know what the next personnel agenda, possibly the following one. But this is just the one-page personnel agenda.
Okay, so the reason they're not going to be on the personnel agenda this time is because they don't get paid until 2 weeks
Yeah,
or 3 weeks from now.
correct, and we haven't entered any of that, not
Okay.
knowing if we had approval.
That'll work. I have a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you again soon. You don't look like Vinny.
No, I don't. I just want to say thank you. Tarrant County's leading the way. We have been in a jail crisis across the state, and what y'all have done here today, I think, will absolutely help what we're trying to accomplish. And it certainly shows the care for those souls that come to work every day through some horrible circumstances, and certainly stand true to the guard. Great leadership down there, and I appreciate each and every one of y'all. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Sheriff.
And GK's team did a great job along with Ange and Tina's team.
Now, Vinny.
So we at Public Health have one item for your consideration this afternoon. It's the request for approval of a contractor agreement between Tarrant County and the National Association of County and City Health Officials on behalf of Tarrant County Public Health.
Move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Melissa?
Sorry. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We have one item for your consideration this morning. It's regarding bid number 2021-120. This is an annual contract for Cisco Application Dynamics for information technology, awarding to Red River Technology in the amount of $433,374.79. If approved, we're also requesting contract approval.
Move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Are there any appointments?
Thank you.
There being none, then you have before you the claims, including the addendum. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Manius.
We have one final briefing item this morning, Your Honor. It deals with item E, which is the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. We've had just several things. First of all, as you can tell, we don't have a work session today. And so the calendar that we have now as it relates to ARPA, obviously we're not going to have a work session on August 3rd, and we'll get this out in a memorandum to you. We do have work session number 4, which is going to be August 24th, and the work session number 5 is going to be September 14th. We are working the contracts through. You're going to see the community resource contract come to you next week, and we'll have an introductory briefing and a program review by the contractor on the 17th for your discussion and input. There's one item that I would like to talk with the court about and make a recommendation to you, and that deals with the Mental Health Jail Diversion Center. It's something that we talked about last week in the work session on ARPA.
Hey, GK, since you're switching subjects, Kristen had sent out a memo with the updated ARPA schedule. This is what, are there any changes from what you sent out on Friday? Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, good, GK.
Okay.
I'm good. Sorry, that's my mistake. I'm good.
Okay. So last week we talked about various things as related to the jail diversion program. And we talked really about two different things. We talked about funding related issues and then who would actually manage and run the facility. I would like to only talk about one of those elements this morning or this afternoon, and that's the funding. I had sent you all a memo yesterday with a recommendation. Since this is a new program for Tarrant County, and we really, in any new program, we need to have a stabilization period, I'm going to make a recommendation that that as it relates to the facilities, that the county purchased the facilities that we're considering, and utilization of ARPA funds to make that purchase. And then also for the first 2 years of operation, I am recommending to the court that we use ARPA funds to provide program operations for those 2 years. The reason for is it creates a stabilization time or period for us. We'll be able to fine-tune the operations, really have the ability to implement best practices and determine the most feasible and efficient way of operations of the system itself. It also gives the Commissioners Court a little time to review the operations of the facility, to make any changes that you might have, and these funds are available to us, and we believe that basically it's a very good utilization of those funds, plus it addresses one of the major things that ARPA requires, and that's how we handle mental health. And so that is my recommendation, and I'll be more than happy to discuss that recommendation. If in fact you all feel the same as I do, then if you would give me a motion and an approval of the recommendation as stated.
I move approval of the recommendation.
Second. You're not wishing to expand that recommendation?
I was going to do that in a separate motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Now, I want to discuss the other issue.
Okay.
The issue of management of the Mental Health Jail Diversion Center. And I think that in accordance with what we've seen to be best practices across the state and perhaps even across the country, the Mental Health Mental Retardation Agency is perhaps the best manager of these types of facilities, and I would like to move that we appoint our MHMR as the manager of our Mental Health Jail Diversion Center.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I agree. I mean, I started off and felt like the JPS, but I think through the discussions, it's MHMR will be as good, if not better, the place to put that, and so I support that also.
I do too.
Any further discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Now go buy it.
Your Honor, members of the court, that's all we have currently.
Then I will move that we recess and move to close to discuss items exempt under Section 551, 1071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the Texas Government Code. Having returned from our closed session, and having no business to conduct at this time, we stand adjourned again in memory of Dee Jennings.
And devoid is spelled D-E-V-O-Y-D.
We did.